All right, so we are moving on to the discussion of fractions, mainly ordering, comparing, and plotting. So our learning target for today is I can compare, order, and identify fractions on number lines. So a lot of times people think that this is a difficult process to do when it comes to fractions, but guys, fractions are no different. They are no different than a decimal. They are no different than a whole number. They're no different than an integer. It's just a number value, okay? And I'm going to teach you some simple and easy ways to be able to identify fractions on your number line, how to be able to compare your fractions. And I will say, for one thing, when you are ordering, so putting things in order from least to greatest, or when you are comparing which one's bigger, which one's smaller, in fraction form, it's actually easiest if you just go ahead and convert your fractions into decimals. So that's my advice to you, Camille. Turn around. That would be my advice to you, is to go ahead and convert your fractions into decimals before making your comparisons. So let's take a look here at these first couple problems. If I've got 7 over 10 and I've got 3 over 5 and I'm wanting to go ahead and compare them, it might make sense or make it a little easier to go ahead and convert these into their decimals. Guys, when you are converting, there are multiple ways that you can go about that. You could type your fraction in by hitting your fraction button and then type in 7 over 10. Get out of your fraction by using these arrows here. And you can either hit this little double arrow, this white double arrow conversion button. When you do that and hit enter, it'll change it into a decimal for you. When converting, fractions convert to decimals by just simple division. This basically means 7 divided by 10. If you type 7 divided by 10 into your calculator and hit enter, it will also come out to 0.7. So they are the same concept. Converting fractions to decimals is just a division problem. Numerator divided by denominator. Okay, so knowing that, we've got 7 over 10 is really the same thing as 0.7. 0.7. Okay, go ahead right now in your calculators. I want you to convert 3 over 5, 3/5. What is that going to convert to as a decimal? Everyone should be using their calculator right now. When you are ready, go ahead and have your hand raised. When you've converted 3 over 5 into a decimal, then raise your hand. Sophia, what'd you get? 0.6. Okay, if you do 3 divided by 5, you would get 0.6. So it's easier to compare these. When you are comparing, you go in order. You start from the far left. They both have a 0, so they're both the same there. Then they both have a decimal. Then we look at the 7 compared to the 6. Is 7 greater than or less than the 6? Greater than. So our symbol here is going to be greater than. And remember, if you have a hard time remembering what symbol is what, remember the mouth always opens up to the bigger value. So 0.7 is greater than 0.6, or 7 over 10 is greater than 3 over 5. Let's take a look at problem number 2. We have negative 1 over 3 and negative 3 over 4. So when we convert, negative 1 over 3 is going to convert to a negative 0 point, and then the 3 is going to keep repeating. Okay, so I can just do 3, 3, and it just keeps going. Negative 3 over 4 is going to convert to a negative 0.75. Okay, so again, I'm going to look at what is the same and what is different. So I start with the first value. The zeros are the same. I move to the second value. I've got a 3 and I've got a 7, but I'm talking about negatives. So which one's bigger, a negative 3 or a negative 7? Negative 3. So that means negative 0.3 repeated is greater than negative 0.75. So our fraction, negative 1/3, is greater than negative 3/4. Okay, for problem 3, here we don't just have a fraction, we have a mixed number. We have a mixed number, so we can do the same thing if we convert the fraction and just put a 1 in front of the decimal. So this is going to convert to 1.5. This is already in decimal form. This is 1.456. Now, I have every year I have students go, oh, well, 1.456 is bigger than 1.5 because 456 is bigger than 5. Exactly. This, I could actually add a bunch of zeros behind it, couldn't I? This doesn't just have to be 5. This could be 0.50. This could be 0.500. This could be 0.5000. I could add as many zeros as I want behind it to make it easier. Like I said before, you are comparing each place value. These ones are the same, but when I look at the 5 and the 4, they are different. So I'm comparing this 5 to this 4, and 5 is bigger than the 4. So that means 1 1/2 is greater than 1.456. Okay, so comparing and ordering, it's easier to do if you have them in decimal form. You just have to go through each place value when you're putting it in order or comparing. Let's take a look at how to number or label things on our number line. So when labeling each of these points, you have to first figure out what is the fraction value or mixed number value of each of these points. And it's really simple. I want everyone to put one finger on the 0 and then put one finger on the 1. What you want to do is you want to count how many spots or units does it take to get from 0 to 1. I want to count how many units it takes me to get from 0 to 1. So let's count it. If I'm going from 0 to 1, I'm going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots. It takes me 6 units to get from 0 to the 1. So that means each one of these is worth a 1/6 of a whole. So underneath each of these tally marks, I want you guys to go ahead and put a fraction bar and a 6 as your denominator. Do you have a question, Camille? What?
I was writing everything down. I don't have a picture.
Come get one up here. They're all passed out. So underneath each of these bars, I want you to put a fraction bar and a denominator of a 6. Now, when I get to one whole, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it as it is. Right here, honey. So now when I'm trying to figure out, I need to figure out the numerator. The numerator is just going to count along as if it was one tally mark each. So this is going to become 1 over 6. The next one is 2 over 6. Then we get 3 over 6, 4 over 6, 5 over 6. Where's 6 over 6? One whole, right? This 6 over 6 is just what one whole would be considered. Okay, now once I pass that one whole, guess what? It's going to repeat again. 1 over 6, 2 over 6, 3 over 6, 4 over 6. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. When I'm working backwards, it's the negatives, but it's still the same. So we have a negative 1 over 6, a negative 2 over 6, negative 3 over 6, negative 4 over 6, negative 5 over 6. Negative 6 over 6 is just a negative 1. And then it repeats again. negative 1 over 6, negative 2 over 6, negative 3 over 6, negative 4 over 6. Now Marshall, notice, he says, well, wait, hold on. Once we pass the 1, shouldn't it be 1 and 1/6 and 1 and 2/6? Yes, it should. So what I want you guys to do is we're going to look at these two sections right here, between the 0 and the 1 whole and the 0 and the negative 1. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this portion first. Starting at my 0 mark and going to my 1 whole mark, from these 2 points, from here to here, this is considered to not be a mixed number. There is no mixed number here. There is no mixed number between this section. It is just the fraction. Same thing going from 0 to negative 1. This little portion right here also is no mixed number. It's just the fraction. Now beyond those points, we will start creating a mixed number. So starting at the 1 mark and progressing onward, that's when I'm going to start having a mixed number. And in this case, because I only have it plotted like so, it's going to create a mixed number that is 1 and then whatever your fraction over 6 is. Anything beyond this point is going to be 1 and 1/6, or 1 and 2/6, or 1 and 3/6, until we get to the 2. Once we get to 2, it would become 2 and 1/6, and 2 and 2/6, and so on and so forth. Same thing going in the opposite direction. Starting at negative 1 and moving onward. These would be mixed numbers that are negative 1 and then whatever your number is over 6. Negative 1 and 1/6, negative 1 and 2/6, negative 1 and 3/6, and so on and so forth. Okay, so knowing that, it should make it easier for us to be able to identify what each of these points is labeled at. So let's start with point A. Point A is labeled right here. It is in the negative 1 and some number over 6 portion. So I know point A is going to be a mixed number of negative 1 and what's the fraction? What's the fraction at? Angel? The negative 3/6. So we know it's negative 1, and we don't have to write the negative again because we've already written it, 3/6. So knowing that, I first need to go ahead and put that in my calculator because I want to see, can I simplify it? My calculator is going to simplify everything for me. So if I do my mixed number, I can hit my second button and my fraction button. That makes a mixed number. I'm going to type negative 1. I'm going to move my fraction over, and I'm going to type 3 and then a 6 and hit enter. Now it's going to convert it into just a fraction for me. So if I hit second and then the fraction to mixed number button, it'll show me what my mixed number is. Now, you don't have to type it in as a mixed number. You could just type the fraction part in. You could just type 3 over 6 and hit enter. And it will show you, hey, your fraction portion needs to be simplified to 1 over 2, which makes sense. 3 can be divided by 3. 6 can be divided by 3. Both of those would give you 1 over 2. So point A is at negative 1 and 1/2. Now point B is not in a mixed number format, so are we going to have a whole number portion? Are we going to have a 1 or a 2 or a 3 as a whole number? No, because it's no mixed number. It's just the fraction itself. So So B is at this point right here. B is at a negative 2 over 6. So I want you to type negative 2 over 6 and tell me, can that be simplified any further? Negative 2 over 6. Type it into your calculator, negative 2 over 6, and hit enter. What does that simplify to? Negative 1/3. So B is at the point negative 1 over 3. Let's take a look at point C. Point C, if I follow it down, it's at 3 over 6. Type in 3 over 6 into your calculator. Can that be simplified? To what? 3 over 6 simplifies to what, Brian? 1/2. 1 over 2. Point D. Point D, we are now we're past the 1 whole mark, so we know it's going to be 1. And what's our fraction at? The fraction's at what, guys? 4/6. So type 4 over 6 into your calculator. Can you simplify 4 over 6? What does 4 over 6 simplify to, Natalia? 2 over 3, right? 2/3. So you get 1 and 2/3. Okay? Let's do one more together. Let's do the next fraction bars together. Okay, remember the first thing I tell you to do is to count how many units it takes you to get from 0 to 1. Who can raise their hand and tell me how many jumps or units does it take us to get from 0 to 1? Ashir? 3. So that means each of these fractions is going to have a denominator of 3. So we have a 3. Over here, it's going to have denominators of 3. Over here, denominators of 3. Over here, denominator of 3. Even going backwards, they're all going to have denominators of 3s. It's just a matter of some of them are going to now be negatives. Okay? So negative, negative, negative. Okay? Now, we just count on top. We've got 1/3, 2/3, 3/3 would be 1 whole. Then we have another 1/3, 2/3, 1/3, 2/3, 1/3. Working backwards, it's negative 1/3, negative 2/3, and so on and so forth. So we've got that all filled in. Now we need to just figure out which parts are going to be whole numbers and which parts are not. So starting here at the 0 mark, actually I'm going to go ahead and go from this point, from negative 1 all the way to the positive 1. All of this portion right here is no mixed number. That whole portion has no mixed number whatsoever. Now, when I go from 1 whole to 2, or from negative 1 whole to negative 2, these are going to have mixed numbers. They are going to have mixed numbers of 1 and then a number over 3, or negative 1 and some number over 3. Right? Because they're between the 1 and 2 mark, or the negative 1 and negative 2 mark. So that means anything beyond the negative 1 is going to have a whole number of a negative 1 until you get to that negative 2 or positive 2 mark. Once we get to that mark, what's the whole number going to become now? What's the whole number going to be for this portion, guys? A 2. Because once I get to the 2 and move beyond, my whole number is now a 2 and some fraction over 3. Same thing if I'm working backwards, going from negative 2 up to the negative 3, that's going to have a fraction of negative 2 and then some fraction over 3. Anything beyond that, now that we're at the 3 mark, if we go beyond that, that's now going to have a whole number of what? 3. Okay, so these are all going to have whole numbers of 3 and some fraction over 3. Or negative 3 and some fraction number over 3. So you're just splitting them up into little sections here. All right, let's go ahead and work on through this. Let's start with point A. Point A is in the -1 mixed number range. What is the fraction portion at, though? -2/3. So we have 2/3 here. And that cannot be simplified. -1 and 2/3 is as simplified as it's going to get. Stop clicking the mouse. Let's look at B. What fraction is B at, guys? -1/3. What fraction is C at? 1 and 1/3. 1 and 1/3. What about D? What is D located at? 3 and 1/3. Very good. 3 and 1/3. Okay. All right, I want you guys to do this next one on your own, this one at the bottom. I want you to identify what the fraction count is going to be. I want you to split it up into which portions are your whole numbers and which ones are not your whole numbers. And then identify A, B, C, and D. So if you had done this correctly, each of the fractions is worth what's the denominator of each of the fractions? 5. The denominators are going to be 5s. Okay, so if you did it correctly, then A would be located at -1 and 2/5. B would be located at -1/5. C would be located at +4/5. And D is going to be located at +1 and 3/5. Okay, so just knowing how to split them up into those segments is really helpful. If you turn it over to the back, I want you to do one more example on your own. Do one more on your own. And don't forget to simplify your fractions. So that next example on the back, you're going to have to simplify the fractions at the end. So when you break it down, each of your fractions should be a tenth. So 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, and so on and so forth. We have this whole section right here that is not going to be a mixed number. It's just going to be a simple fraction. And then anything beyond that -1 mark is going to be a mixed number. Okay, so point A happens to be at -1 and 9/10. Point B happens to be at -5/10, but that simplifies. -5/10, if you plugged it into your calculator, simplifies to -1/2. C is at a +1/10. And then D was at 8/10, but 8/10 can simplify to 4/5. So you always want to make sure that you're simplifying those. Okay? What you are going to do tonight as part of your homework, and you have time to work on it right now, you've got a few minutes to be able to work on it because it's not much. You are going to put these values in order from least to greatest. And then based off of this table of information, we've got some stuff in fractions, some in decimals. You're going to answer these 3 questions at the bottom. Okay? It's very simple. Go ahead and you can get started on that right now.